Welcome to another edition of Land and Legacy by Griffith Realty. I'm Scott Griffith, and this is my sister Carol Griffith. And today we're very excited to have a very honorable guest and distinguished guest of our county, the county clerk, Betsy Hundley. And it's for those who don't remember, this is an elected position, but it's overseeing a very large part of our county administration. And I'm going to be the neophyte that I am, and I'm going to let Betsy explain a little bit of what her responsibilities are as the county clerk.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you, both of you, for having me on with you today. It's interesting. The county clerk is one of the 6 countywide elected officials here in Livingston County, and most people really don't have an understanding of what all the county clerk does. So I appreciate the opportunity to educate the public on what county clerks do. There are 83 county clerks in the state of Michigan, and each one of us, our duties vary slightly because some offices will have the circuit court division, and others have already ceded that over and given it to the chief judges. So in Livingston County, what I do is I'm clerk to the circuit court, so the 44th Circuit Court. In addition, I am clerk to the Board of Commissioners. We also have the Vital Records Division of the office, and then we have the Elections Division. So I allocate my time between all of these divisions, and sometimes a day is full with each division having issues that I'm managing.
Okay, so a typical person in our county, let's hope they don't have to come in contact with the court too often, but there maybe the vital records would include things like death certificates, marriage licenses. What other things do they?
It does.
Yeah.
One of the most popular applications in our county is a concealed pistol license application.
There you go. Sure.
So people might be interested to know that we issue between 4,000 and 5,500 per year of new and renewal concealed pistol licenses. So there are a large number of those that we issue. We do process all of the permanent records related to our life events, including marriage, birth, and death.
Okay.
And I'm excited to be able to make the public aware that we just implemented a new platform for indexing our vital records and issuing, and people can now apply online for a marriage license. In the past, someone would need to make 2 trips to our office to apply for a marriage license. Now they're able to make just 1 trip. They can apply online. They can come in after the 3-day waiting period and then pick up that license. So
That's
we are
great.
working hard to streamline services and improve it to the public.
Oh, that's great.
That's wonderful.
That's really wonderful. So I'll admit that I asked outside of this podcast before Betsy came in. Since there's a lot of things you're covering, how big a part of the budget did you think this is to the county? And what did you say, about $20 million?
I wish that I was given $20 million to manage for the residents, but actually we get about $2 million is what we operate on. I oversee 5 separate budgets, and with those 5 budgets, we also manage upwards of 40 different trust accounts. So there's a lot of money that we receive. Like for the court end alone, we will receive payments that are going to be distributed to both the state of Michigan as well as other police agencies. Oh, okay. And when you're looking, we collect the money, restitution that is owed to victims of crime. So we want to make sure that victims receive the restitution that is paid on, for those victims.
Yeah, no, so that's great. I wouldn't know where that goes.
About 40 trust accounts and 5 different budgets in total, managing about $2 million annually for the residents of Livingston County.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I had no idea. So that is interesting. So I suspect for most people like myself, the county clerk always becomes a very visible part of every election, and that seems to be when we think of you the most. I guess unless I'm getting married again, and I won't be, but anyway. So my wife has told me.
You'll be online.
But I mean, the election process has become so widely publicized, and I don't know what else you want to say about it. It's become such a big part of the news anymore that we know about clerks across America. ago that we didn't even know about. They used to be invisible for that process. Now it's everywhere, right? And so
that's a very true statement. And I will tell you, I started in office in 2016. And the scrutiny on elections from 2016 until now are just totally different. So there has been a change.
Sure.
And I think it's important that people understand and educate themselves on the election process, because election administrators work very hard to adhere to the federal and state laws that govern elections, but we are just human.
Right.
Any human could make a mistake.
Right.
And
Sure.
elections has reached the point where there's a very low, even near zero tolerance for errors by election administrators. I think it's probably one of the most well-known parts of the clerk's office. It certainly has the media focus today.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Elections.
thanks to the media, I think it's become what people think the clerk's office is, because that seems to be all we talk about over the last few years, right? So,
It is. And while an election is one day for the public, it's over a year for election administrators. And I'll walk you through a little bit of that process. Yeah. We start accepting candidate filings. We had our first candidate filings back in December of 2021 for the November election of 2022.
Wow.
And we just received our post-election audit assignments from the Bureau of Elections earlier this week. So the Elections Division, we will start the post-election audits of the November 8th general election next week. So we have well over a year of staff time and service to the public invested in this election. That is one day,
It is amazing. And of course, we all want a truthful and a tight election. So I get it just seems like there's been a lot more scrutiny. And as we all know, or if we don't, we should know that we just voted to change the rules on how we do elections. So
that is correct.
So now you have to implement a whole group of new rules, which most people probably aren't even quite aware. Some I'm sure are, but most people will say, when they talk about 9 days of voting, they're going to say, what are you talking about 9 days of voting? It's on this day, and there's all these new things, right? So, yeah.
There are a lot of new things. Let me just give you a brief
that'd
background
be great.
on, how elections are basically structured in Michigan.
Sure.
Michigan is one of only 2 states that are decentralized with our elections. So that means that our city and township clerks have more responsibilities in the state of Michigan than what they do in other states. So Michigan election law assigns certain duties to the county clerk, certain duties to the city and township clerks. And the actual issuing of ballots and operation of the polling locations is currently with the city and township clerks. Back in 2018 was the first real change to the election structure in Michigan. Prior to 2018, the Michigan legislature basically passed laws that governed how elections are conducted in Michigan. Along comes a statewide constitutional ballot proposal in 2018 that made the first real change to how the elections are conducted in Michigan. That guaranteed, among other changes, the right to straight party voting and no reason absentee voting. Prior to that, you had to have a reason. Well, now we fast forward to November of 2022, and the voters in the state of Michigan passed another statewide constitutional amendment that's going to change once again how elections are conducted in the state of Michigan. And what's important to understand is the constitutional changes that were just made. There will be legislation enacted that's going to provide guidance to how we're going to accomplish, the assignment from the voters.
Sure.
But I'd like to point out that passed statewide almost on a 60% yes vote. But in addition to that, it also passed here in Livingston County. So when I have residents who tell me, I'm concerned because we have ballot drop boxes, we have, absentee voting, My response is, look, that was even approved by the voters within Livingston County, not just statewide.
It's not just a statewide deal that somehow we were
Correct.
on the other side of. Yeah, I get it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So both of those constitutional amendments passed in Livingston County. So the voters have spoke loud and clear. They are directing the state legislature and, the election administrators that we want these features. And, I'll cover a few of them that people will be most concerned about is, first off, we now have a constitutional amendment for ballot drop boxes. I'm sure you have heard certain residents are very concerned with the use of drop boxes. State-funded drop boxes are now guaranteed as a constitutional provision. For every 15,000 residents a jurisdiction has, you must have a drop box. And then in addition, it requires they be equally located around the jurisdiction. So currently, all drop boxes are located on city or township property, but that's going to have to change in order to become compliance with the constitutional change.
And I'm going to ask a question here only because I don't know the answer, and that's if people that have concerns with drop boxes, are they afraid that they're going to, quote unquote, get stuffed? Are they afraid they're going to be taken away? What?
Or tampered with,
I don't know
destroyed.
I don't know where the rub comes, if you know what I mean. I just trying to find out.
It's a combination.
Is it? Okay, I
There
just
are
try to
people who
understand
are
what the issue is.
concerned
Yeah.
that there'll be ballot harvesting, and that means people collect voted ballots and return them to these drop boxes who are not by law eligible to return ballots.
Okay, so
that's
somebody
one of
collects
the
them for somebody
concerns.
else. Okay,
Correct.
I understand it. Okay.
Another concern might be that the ballots are damaged.
Sure.
That there might be liquids put in those containers. Ballots are damaged, etc. So,
Sure.
as many concerns as we could create, someone has that concern.
Sure. Okay, I just trying to understand. Yeah.
For
so-
every concern, there's a valid reason. There are two sides of an argument.
Sure.
So for as many concerns, there are people who have valid reasons that justify the use of those ballot drop boxes.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm sure there are, and that's why I try to
So-
just weigh out the deal. Yeah. Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I just
Yes.
didn't know what would be the big issue.
Well,
Yeah.
with all of the accommodations come costs.
Absolutely.
So I think that sort of, we don't think of that when we have those changes in mind. Who's going to bear the cost?
Well, the cost for all elections, no matter where the funding comes from, it's we the taxpayer.
Yeah, some point the taxpayers.
The taxpayer
So-
is going to be footing the bill of the increased cost of elections. And the constitutional provision did include some funding. So with
good.
absentee ballots, the state will now reimburse city and township clerks for the absentee ballot applications, and they will pay the postage for the return of these absentee ballots and applications. But when you're talking about that, that's we the taxpayer.
Right,
We will
We're
be
all paying
footing-
for everybody else's ballot, right? yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, another provision is going to be 9 days of early voting. Now, the constitutional provision requires that 9 days of early voting when there are federal or state offices on the ballot. However, we election administrators realize there is a voter education issue, that it's difficult to start utilizing early voting for large elections and then not make that available for your school elections.
Yes.
So I
right.
anticipate that once we get the guidance from the state on the exact procedures that are going to have to be implemented to launch the early voting, that we are going to see it used for large and small elections.
So let me be really stupid here and just ask. So I can vote absentee, and I'm voting early, and then there's a 9-day early. So this allows a person to physically come in for those 9 days? Is that the differentiation between, because if I'm sending my absentee vote, I think I just voted early in more than 9 days most of the time.
Thank you for this question, because that's something that I take for granted. And there is a difference between absentee voting and early voting. Absentee voting is when the voter completes their ballot and then seals that ballot inside a secrecy envelope and then inside a sealed envelope,
right.
return that to the local clerk, and it is processed by an absent voter counting board or in the precinct on election day. So you have election officials who are processing that ballot through a tabulator. Early voting, on the other hand, is when a voter is going to be able to mark their ballot with the choices of their selection and feed that ballot through the tabulator themselves, just like you do in a polling location.
So just like the polling location when you say
Yes.
put it in there.
Did not
And
realize
okay.
was the
That's great.
nuance
I'm sitting there going, I
That's
think
the
I'm early
nuance.
voting, aren't I?
That's the nuanced difference.
right.
And I will tell you, I hope to see people embrace the early voting, even utilize that more so than absentee. And the reason is you have the opportunity to correct the errors if you made an error marking your ballot.
Oh,
a primary election is a perfect example of that. So on a primary election, we have both parties, both of the major political parties on one ballot, and voters have to limit their choices to one party. If you crossover vote and you vote both parties during a primary election, that tabulator is going to spit that ballot back out and say it's invalid because you have crossed over in these parties. Your options is to cast as is, and none of your contests will count. None of your votes
None of them will count, right.
Because we don't know which party
Right,
you intended
right.
to vote for. Or you can check with poll worker, we can spoil that ballot, issue you a new one, and you can correct your errors. When you vote via absentee, you're not there to correct your errors.
Sure.
So none of your voice is going to be counted. Your ballot pretty much is not counted if you crossover voted. So if we can get people to utilize the early voting process, once those steps are established.
Interesting. That's great.
We hope to have more people's voice count when they cast their ballot.
Because what is it, a year ago or something, 50% of the votes were absentee or something. So it's fascinating because you're going to ask those people now, could you do your 9 days versus that if you want to make sure of this? So that's good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Coming off of 2020, and we all know that, COVID was around at that point in time. It was the first major election with no reason absentee balloting. So we saw a drastic increase in the use of absentee voting. And we actually, in some jurisdictions exceeded 50% turnout via absentee ballot. Now that things are returning to what I would say is a more normal state, we're averaging right around 45% of all ballots cast absentee. And I am a data junkie. I will tell you, data numbers are important to me.
Sure.
It's how we prepare to be ready to serve the public. But I'm anxious to see how many people embrace early voting.
That's interesting. Yeah,
It's going to be very interesting.
Now that you told me the difference, I find it interesting because I would have said I don't see the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm afraid many people in the public won't understand the difference, but the opportunity to correct an error and ensure that your vote counted and your voice is being heard is critical.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So
Absolutely
do you
critical.
see with this ability of early voting to, how should I say, spread out the voting so you don't have the election day intensity or not?
Well, I think
I don't know. I mean, I guess we're all speculating, but
we're all
so,
speculating,
yeah.
and I think you're going to see that it's going to vary by jurisdiction.
Sure.
So I think, unfortunately, you're always going to have that group of people who wait to the very last minute. And one of the constitutional changes that 2018 brought us is same-day voter registration. Now, my goodness, people know an election's coming well in advance, and we as election administrators encourage people, check your registration, know where your polling location is,
Right.
decide how you're going to vote, have a plan in place. And here we are. We have jurisdictions that had lines of people yet at 8:00 p.m. who were in line to register and vote on Election Day in November. So I think if we had a way to get the public to utilize online registration, voter registration, and get these essential steps taken care of well before the election, it would be great. But we can't force people to do that.
Right. Well, and a lot of those areas were college areas, and I know when I was in college, if that was the day I was going to do it, that was the day. I didn't have a plan before, so that's why they do that, I guess. Well,
so many people get Election Day off work too. So what does that do? Or how about 9 days? I think that's going to be a tough one to monitor. You can't give someone 9 days or 1 day out of the 9 off to go vote. That's going to be cumbersome.
It'll create some challenges, and we're going to have more trained election inspectors, because the average age of our election inspectors, sincerely, is about 65 to 70 years old here in Livingston County. And it would be challenging to go 9 days straight before an election working from retirement.
Let's face it, they're retirees, and that's why they did the 1 day. And now and now you're going to say, "Let's work a 9-day week." They might say, "No, I don't think so."
Absolutely. So and it's difficult. There are many little nuances that election inspectors have to be aware of and have to carry out the laws, but I truly believe it has successfully been implemented in many states. We're smart enough to figure this out.
We'll accomplish it. It's just new, right?
A few speed bumps along the way.
With a few speed bumps. And, what it is I want to do what's best for our voters. I know the election administrators that I work side by side in Livingston County, meeting our city and township clerks. Right. We are all here to serve the public, and we want to make this as easy as we can for the voters. I look forward to possibly joining you in another 2 years after we have actually done some early voting to see how it looks. Sure. I hope that the legislature and the state will provide some funding for this. I think we have a great opportunity to utilize some of the county resources to create, the constitutional amendment allows the county clerk to conduct some of this, but that requires resources.
Sure.
We need a location. We need the manpower and the staffing power. We need trained workers. And then we also need to have the infrastructure put in place to do this. But I think once we get it developed, it will be a benefit to the residents for many years to come.
That's great. Well, that's very positive then, Betsy. Yeah. I guess, is there any other key issues I need to know about this change, or are we good?
There are many other changes included. I think one of them that people need to be aware of is in the elections that will be coming up, there is an opportunity to request an official ballot to be mailed to you by the submission of one absentee ballot application. And then you can have an official ballot mailed to you for all future elections. So that's a big change.
That is big, yeah.
Currently, you submit an application for the official ballot with every election or every election cycle. So there are a few other changes, but you know what? I just would ask that people get their information on elections from election administrators. The disinformation and the misinformation that we are fighting with information in the public is borderline frightening, because somebody will misunderstand what they saw, not understand a correct process, and they tell their neighbor, they tell their friends, and then we have all of this incorrect information floating around. Do yourself a favor and contact your city or township clerk or the county clerk and ask your questions directly so that you know you're getting accurate information.
That's great.
That would be very helpful.
Advice, yes.
That's great advice.
So one thing I know Betsy is just too modest to tell everyone and all of our listeners that she is the Clerk of the Year, honored as Clerk of the Year for all of Michigan, the state of Michigan. So that's
Yay! Congratulations.
And that's a huge honor. So
that is a huge honor.
Are so fortunate in Livingston County to have you as our clerk, because as you can see, you take your subject matter very seriously. You're highly educated, and the efficiencies that you've put in place for effective government is something that we haven't seen, and we all benefit from that. So we appreciate your service.
And thank you.
It was such an honor to receive that. You know, that's an award that is issued, decided on by my fellow county clerks. So
that makes it more special, doesn't it?
It makes
your
it more
peers
special.
can
So
honor you.
The very first one. I mean, I joined an elite group. There's only been 42 other clerks prior to me who have been granted this award. So, it is quite an honor. It's a privilege.
That's really great.
We're honored to have you in our county. So,
and because you're a county resident, I tell everybody this when we do the podcast. We always ask these two questions at the end. So, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not doing work in Livingston County?
You know, I enjoy just having time to read books for pleasure, because I do a lot of technical reading. I do a lot of reading of the law, and being able to unwind and read a good John Grisham novel is one of my favorite pastimes.
Of course, it's legal. No, that's good. And then the other one is, so if you go out to dinner and it's a special event for you and your husband or family, where's the place you like to pick? I'm sure there's many because we all live in Livingston County, but what's kind of a favorite or two?
One of my favorites is Chalmichi's right here in Brighton.
Nice,
so,
yeah.
We generally, we're very close to the Brighton area, and we find ourselves coming this way quite often. So
that's great.
Brighton Bar Grill, Stillwater, and Chalmichi's are my favorites.
No, that's fun. Yeah, so, I'd have to agree. They're all really good. So that's nice.
They are.
Well, so thank you so much for today coming in and being our guest,
and
your service, and just telling us about the job, so maybe somebody will understand how good a county we really have. You know,
we are blessed.
Yes.
There's a great level of cooperation. You know, perfect example is before an election, I'm coordinating with the sheriff's department, with emergency management. We have to have plans in place for if power is lost at a polling location, and you know, just the countywide cooperation. We are blessed in Livingston County.
Well, thank you for your service. So.
You're welcome, and thank you.
And with that, I guess I'll say thank you for watching Land and Legacy by Griffith Realty, and hope to see you again soon.